the roles. So the table topic masters, Diego, can you explain the table topic master more?
Hi everyone, I'm Diego. Table Topics is an opportunity for people who haven't developed a prepared speech for tonight. It emphasizes the importance of learning how to think quickly on your feet when you're in the elevator and your boss walks into the room and says, "Hey Don, how's that project going really well?" And you need to be able to summarize quickly what information you want to share with them in a timely manner. And so that's what skills are being exercised with the Table Topics portion of the meeting.
Thanks, Diego. Great explanation. Our general evaluator for tonight's Heather. Can you give us a summary of the general evaluator role?
Sure. As general evaluator, I'll kind of keep track of things happening during the meeting, like our smoothness and our transitioning and just the general flow. And at the end of the meeting, I'll call on the timer and the grammarian to give reports about everybody's speeches and filler words.
Thanks, Heather. Our timer is Sean. Sean, can you tell us what the timer's job is?
I'll be keeping the time tonight for the speeches, the evaluations, the table topics, individual table topics. There's a time frame of 1 to 2 minutes for table topics, 5 to 7 minutes for prepared speeches. There'll be 5 minutes, for instance, on prepared speech. 5 minutes will be a green, 6 minutes a yellow, and then stop at 7 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Our all counter is Donovan.
Well, the all counter is looking for crunch points and how many uses of the rule of the day.
Okay, thanks, Donovan.
Tell them what the word of the day is, please.
She did that.
So
Oh,
we
I'm
split
sorry.
it up. So
We have two, okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
we got it covered this time. So Olivia is our grammarian. Can you explain what grammarian's role?
Hello, I'm Olivia and I will be your grammarian tonight. So I just pulled this right off of Easy Speak. And the grammarian's job is an exercise in improving your listening skills. And I have 3 basic responsibilities, and those include to comment on the positive and negative uses of English during the meeting, to introduce a new word and explain the use of it, and to count the use along with Donovan. Yes. Oops, I just did one. To count the use of crutches such as and Sometimes this role is performed by a separate counter. All of these are designed to help your fellow members improve their use of language. And the word of the day is rapscallion. And the definition is a mischievous person. And to use it in a sentence, these were the rapscallions behind this practical joke.
How do you spell that?
rapscallion. The rapscallion.
All right, thank you, Olivia. Great explanation of the grammarian role. Good reminder for me too, from the official Toastmaster website. All right, so we've gone over all the roles. Now we're going to move into the speeches. So these are pocket speeches. They weren't volunteered for as of last week, so we're grateful that we have 2 speakers that have volunteered to speak kind of at a last minute notice. So that's really great when we have speakers that are able to do that. And some advice, I'm not the best at it, but you can prepare speeches in advance to be able to do pocket speeches. And Lawrence is one of our pocket speech experts. We can always count on him to deliver one. So with that, our first speech is going to be done by Lawrence. So let's welcome Lawrence.
Good evening, fellow Toastmasters and honored guests wherever you are. Today, the theme of our meeting is Huck Finn. Now, Huckleberry Finn was a fictional character that was quite a bit of a rapscallion. Actually, he was not necessarily the ideal person to be a role model for other children. but it was a very interesting book. And the reason that today was picked as Huck Finn was because I forget whether it was published or first released on this day quite a few years back. Anyways, I am a person who likes a lot of the older books and the older literature that came out, although I like a lot of the newer stuff too. I have found that anything you read has value. If you look at even the pulp fiction or the romance novels or anything like that, and I have to admit that I have read some of all of those type of different books, because when you work on boats and you have nothing else to do but read, when you've completed your list of books, then you have to start picking up whatever happens to be available. And so I've read many books that I probably never would have picked up if it wasn't for the fact that they were available on the same boat that I happened to be on. So I have found that all literature that you get has value. Because when an author writes a book, even if it's a simple book, they're trying to get you to feel, what is this character doing? Why is this character acting the way that they're acting? What is their personality? What is their interaction with other people? And if you look at literature just as something that you have to do because that's what your teacher at school told you to do, then there's a good possibility that you could miss all of the wealth that comes in those things. Now, I also think that one of the great problems that we have in our society is that people have a tendency to forget all of the training, all of the learning, all of the knowledge of history. And because of that, we keep doing it over and over and over. So we keep bringing back the same old worn out ideas and finding out they don't work. Whereas if we had studied, even casually studied, the things that happened hundreds of years ago, we would realize maybe these things are not something that needs to be done over and over again. So I highly recommend that people read books. Now, how can you go about finding the books that you like to read? Some people think that's going to be really hard, but it's not really hard. You have certain things that you may be interested in. Say, for instance, you want to become part of a Renaissance group, right? That does the Renaissance festivals or something like that. Well, why not go into the library and look at a book about people who do Renaissance? Or what is there in medieval history? Maybe even go look at books about sword making. Now, one of the interesting things that you may find, if it's a classic book or a famous book, is you may even find cliff notes. You don't know if you'd like the book, go get cliff notes. Read the cliff notes. If it seems like it's interesting, you'll also find other references in there that will guide you towards possibly other books on the same type of subject. So if you find that there's a subject that you like, start reading it. Start talking to other people about it. The next thing you know, they're going to bring up things that you might like too. So, I created a poem. And I'd like to read this poem to you. I think you might find it interesting. I hope that you might find it interesting and not necessarily consider me as a rapscallion for making you listen to it. Ancient cover, leather, dust, faded pictures, forgotten quest, faded ink, trace of mold, pressed in letters, very old. Yellowed pages, dog-eared, a few, crispy edges, lost ones too. Oh, the dreams this did create. Knighthood, kingdoms, small and great. Words of wisdom on every page. Transcends time, era, age. Read it once or read it twice. Then on the shelf. Use the lessons. Study yourself. This is the purpose of literature. Thank you very much. Mr. Toastmaster.
Really enjoyed that speech, Lawrence, and reading is something that growing up I really didn't care for because it was forced on me, like you said, but now that I'm older and I'm reading stuff that I care about, I actually enjoy it. So reading is very valuable and very important, so thanks for sharing that with us. Now moving on to our second speaker, Susan is going to share with us something that was going to do an educational overview on, but she's going to expand on a little more and turn it into a speech. So let's welcome Susan.
Thank you. Mr. Toastmaster and Toastmasters and honored guests. Tonight I am going to be speaking on a speaker's best tool. And as Cody said, originally this was going to be an educational course, but it's a twofer. I guess more for me than for you. But I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk to you tonight about it. What communication tool can you use to make your next presentation more effective and engaging? The answer is a question. So questions are really versatile tools. It's sort of like if you would imagine a Swiss Army knife and all the little blades and tools that you can pull out of it. A well-versed and put question can tackle a whole bunch of communication issues, such as building intrigue, or inviting audience engagement, or helping you to remember what you want to say when you're anxious or you have anxiety over speaking. So here are a few ways that we can use questions to become a more compelling and a more confident presenter. So the first thing is you want to connect with your audience. That is sort of the key, really, when you think about giving a speech, is to make sure the audience gets engaged more so than just passively listening to a bunch of words. And you walk away not knowing what it is that the speaker was saying. So by their very nature, questions are kind of like a two-way street. You ask and the audience responds. Now that doesn't happen a lot in here because it's kind of a one-way thing. But in the course of your time speaking elsewhere, you may have a question and answer time. The author recommends 3 types of questions to connect with your audience. The first one would be a rhetorical question. Everybody know what rhetorical questions are? It basically means I'm not expecting an answer from you. I'm just asking the question for various reasons. So here's an example of rhetorical. Would you believe that companies are making robotic honeybees to pollinate crops in areas where the bees are dying off? So I'm asking that question for an effect because it is kind of intriguing when you think about it. And I don't expect anybody to really say, oh yeah, I've heard of it, that would be a little awkward maybe. It just prompts the audience to think about really the issue that I'm bringing up. So then the second thing is polling questions, so that in order to make a point. For example, how many people have ever been stung by a bee? Raise your hand if you have ever been stung by a bee. Okay, all right. So see what I did? I asked the question. I asked you to do a particular thing to show me what your answer was. I modeled it. I raised my hand, and then I asked verbally the question. And now I'll say, well, you know what? That's about the number of people that I imagined would have been stung by a honeybee. So that was it was called a polling question. So that's one way to ask a question. So there's another type. What if? Sort of roots your presentation in a particular time period. For an example would be, what would it be if all crops were pollinated by robo-honeybees? Or remember when modern science made it possible for genetically modified vegetables to yield more crops? Of course, people aren't wanting to eat genetically modified crops these days, but anyway, what that did was it inquired about a possible future or an historical past. And you, again, just like with a rhetorical question, you don't expect people to answer. But it's actually just sort of focusing your audience's attention on the time period that you're talking about. So another thing that it can do is along with engaging your audience, questions build your confidence as you're preparing and delivering a speech. Now, many of us, in particular, I feel like I'm kind of in a spotlight when I'm giving a speech. And you always feel like, well, they're evaluating me, I'm really being scrutinized here. But interestingly, if you can incorporate questions from the moment you start planning your speech, then you can start feeling more confident, because when you think about it, you're taking the spotlight off of yourself and you're placing it on the audience. Even if just for a moment, they're sharing the limelight with you. And this, another way, you ask yourself, well, what does my audience need to hear from me? So if you think of it in terms of doing a service, instead of, hey, I'm up here performing, I'm actually doing a service for the audience. And then think about that, like, what do they really need to know as I'm preparing it? But then also as you're giving it, it's kind of psychological in a way. You just think, well, I'm doing them a service, and so I feel less, I feel less inhibited because I'm doing something good for someone. Okay, and then you outline your talk using questions. So the next time you create your outline for a speech, you want to come up with some rhetorical questions as prompts. For example, why is science important to our society? Well, I'm going to give you 3 reasons why, and then boom, 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 you get it. So this allows you to feel more confident because obviously you know the answers to those questions. You're not going to be blindsided because you created it that way. And second, the whole thing will be more conversational, because when you ask a question, again, it's kind of like a two-way deal, even if it's a rhetorical. So the last kind would be have a back pocket question, like tonight, mine's a back pocket speech. Have a back pocket question to sort of give yourself a break. For instance, if you need a minute just to catch your breath and calm your mind just for a minute, just throw out one of the questions that you had prepared so you can sort of recenter yourself. The the writer of this article, Matt Abrams, is a Stanford University professor, and he says sometimes during the course of his lectures to his students, he'll just slow down the pace. It'll be going along, and then he'll just change the rhythm by stopping and asking a question like, well, what's one idea or tool that we've discussed so far today that you can apply to your life? And so that gives him a minute to rest. And then the students are out there thinking, well, probably some of them are anyway. But, so it just takes a little bit of pressure off, just changes the rhythm of the talk and everything, and it just gives you a chance to calm down for a minute. So the next time you're thinking of doing a speech, consider using that great tool, a question or questions. It will tighten your connection with the audience. It's going to steady your nerves a little, and it'll make for a better speech. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. That was very educational and some tips that we can all take for our next speech or table topics which we're about to get into. So Diego is leading table topics. Diego, would you like to come forward and deliver those?
Thanks, Cody. Hello, everyone. I'm going to be your table topics master for tonight. And I really took this opportunity to exercise the rapscallion side of myself tonight, because tonight it's going to be about words. And so I'm going to, and this is very much in line with kind of the prepared speeches that have been shared tonight, the importance of words. So how we're going to play this is, I'm going to ask for a volunteer. I'm going to give you a word in the dictionary that probably you've never heard about. And I'm going to ask you to give us your best definition of this word. And then at the end, no matter if you got a really good accurate definition of the word or something really creative, I'm just going to share what the dictionary defines this word to be. With that said, do we have our first volunteer tonight? Maurice. Your word is bruxism. B-R-U-X-I-S-M. Bruxism.
Fellow Toastmasters, honored guests, the word that I need to try or attempt to define tonight is bruxism. How do I start defining a word that I've never heard of before, or heard a little of before? Bruxism. I want to start by attempting to break it down, but there's really not much of a breakdown to it. B-U-R-X-I-S-M, right?
That's right.
bruxism.
That's right.
It's a state of brux. Bruxism. Can you use it in a sentence?
Sure.
All right.
His behavior, his frequent behavior of bruxism is really, really aggravating me.
Oh, okay, based on that, I guess unusual traits of a his bruxism of his behavior is starting to bother me. I guess bad traits of his behavior, bad traits of something, or
So bruxism, as defined by the dictionary, is an involuntary and habitual grinding of the teeth.
Okay, with that, if you would have given me rapscallion, I probably would have said it was a lyrical onion. Mr. Tommy Baxter. All right.
All right, do we have the next volunteer? All right, Cody. Your word is Chiliad. C-H-I-L-I-A-D. Chiliad.
Thanks, Diego. So I'm just going to be straightforward and honest. I have no idea what this word is, but I'm going to make something up. So the Chiliad was a epic novel that was released just slightly after the Iliad, so it never got the fame and glory it deserved. It was about a guy on an epic journey, and instead of the sirens being women, they were actually men, and just think of the Iliad. Of all the greatness of it, Chiliad kind of did the opposite. This really wasn't, I think it was ahead of its time. Maybe if it would have had an audience of more people that had a little bit more of an open mind, that it could have been a bigger sensation than it was. So this is my definition of Chiliad.
Great job, Cody. A Chiliad is 1,000 things or 1,000 years.
Nice.
Thanks, Cody. Do we have the next volunteer? Cheyenne's up. Your word is a verb, and it's constellate. C-O-N-S-T-L-L-A-T. Constellate.
I have the word constellate, which sounds very close to another word, consummate. So, in case you didn't know, the word constellate is the opposite when you refrain from intimate activities for the purposes, religious purposes, personal preference. So you constellate to your marriage, your relationship. You do not participate in any activities. Thank you.
Great job.
I thought it would be describing a fashionable woman.
Constellate means to gather together in a cluster or group.
Okay.
Thank you. Do we have the next volunteer?
I thought it, I couldn't get back from it.
Do we have time for?
I'll do it if nobody else will.
Okay, Lawrence. Your word is a verb, and it's bibble. B-I-B-B-L-E. Bibble.
Yep. Well, you see, once upon a time, there was this strange land with all these little people that had hairy toes. Okay? And they lived in these like little cave-like houses off in this strange land. Now, there's one really famous one, and I can't remember what his name quite is, but he had this brother that was kind of a rapscallion type character. And so he was kind of the black sheep of the family. And his name was Bibble. And so he just was, it was kind of hard because he always was related to this really famous book that was made in a different world, in a different generation. And so all the time they were thinking that he's like this book, he's going to be this really holy and wonderful person, this bibbly person, when actually he's a rapscallion. So, Bibble is, the definition of Bibble is the name of a rapscallion hobbit that doesn't necessarily like holy books.
Thanks, Lawrence. The word bibble means to drink often, to eat, and or drink noisily. Do we have another volunteer?
Go ahead.
All right, Don. Your word is cacoryphia-phobia. Cacoryphia-phobia. I'll spell that at the end.
Cacoryphia-phobia.
evening, fellow Toastmasters. I've been asked to define phobia. It could be the fear of speaking or trying to define a word that you've never heard of, in which case I would most likely have at this moment. But in that same line of thinking, all of the definitions that have been given so far tonight, I will remember the definitions that are false and not the accurate one. From constellate to Bibble for the rest of my life. I will relate those with the stories that were shared here tonight. And there might become a setting at some point in the future where that word does come up, and it could be inappropriate or what have you. But that's what I'm going to remember.
Thanks, Tom. Phobia is the fear of failure. Do we have time for one more? I don't want to get in the way of the schedule.
I think we're good on.
We're good? Okay, I'm going to return it back to the Table Topics Master now. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks, Diego. That was a good one. That's the first time we've done the definitions. It was fun. Now we'll move on to the evaluation portion, and Heather's going to lead that as the general evaluator.
Okay, so to kick off this general evaluation, we'll start with our first speech evaluator, which was Cody.
Hey everyone, I had the pleasure to evaluate Lawrence's speech. I'm going to give it the title, The Importance of Reading, because that's the message that he was trying to portray in the speech. Props to him. We have a theme of Huck Finn, and he was able to implement that into the beginning of his speech by talking about Huck Finn as a story and throwing in the word of the day. So just hitting all the themes and words of the day in the beginning. Things I liked about Lawrence's speech, and from the beginning he stepped away from the lectern, which kind of is a little uncomfortable sometimes, especially when you first start out, but it's good. It's good practice. Because a lot of times we won't have a lectern in professional speaking settings, so it's good to get comfortable away from it. And it also means that you don't have your notes in front of you either, so that's always good. And I noticed that he started out with his hands behind his back, kind of, a little bit of a slow start, and then when he wanted to make a significant point, it came out and he made some big gestures when he was getting a little more animated about his story and what the point he was trying to get across, which was really good. I hadn't seen that from Lawrence in a speech that I evaluated from, so I like that, Lawrence. That was good. Also, Lawrence used a personal story, which always helps bring the audience attention in. So he talked about his trips being out on the boat and his involvement with reading and how he was able to accomplish reading a lot of books, which was interesting, to me, and it helped tie in why reading is important to Lawrence. One thing that I thought he could improve on, and I have to remember that this was last minute, he didn't have time to prep this, but I thought if you memorize the poem, you'll be able to keep eye contact with the audience all the way through it, so it would kind of bring them in a little bit more. So I felt like I was starting to get pulled in, and then when you'd look down a little bit, I'd kind of lose a little bit of the power of the poem. But like I said, I know you didn't have time to memorize it. But like for future, if you do improve on the speech, to be able to make eye contact as you continually recite it, I think would be bring a lot of power to the speech and the message. But overall, Lawrence is a accomplished Toastmaster, and he does a great job every time. And I think that the thing I'm going to take away from it is the reservation of the hand gestures until you want to make a big point. So I think that can really boost the message of a speech to save the hand gestures for that. So thank you, Lawrence, for that speech, and I'll now relinquish the lecture back to our general evaluator.
Cody, can I see that?
Oh, yes.
Thank you, Cody. At this time, I'm going to invite Maurice up to the lectern, and he evaluated Susan's speech.
Okay, fellow Toastmasters and honored guests, I've had the privilege to evaluate Susan's pocket speech. And her pocket speech was on communication tools, even though it was meant to be an educational overview. The first tool of many tools, I assume, are questions. And she presented questions or all the communication tools as like a Swiss knife of tools. You have different knives and different little gadgets inside that Swiss knife. And through the topic of questions, there were different elements. Basic questions that needed to be answered, or rhetorical questions which are thought-provoking. These elements help one to develop a speech, and it also helps the audience be engaged during a speech. She had good eye contact with most of the audience, and there was a little vocal variety, even though it was, this I assume is a general lesson, so you wouldn't really expect a lot of vocal variety, but through the rest of the tools, whether it's all done tonight or done through several meetings, I'm pretty sure there are better opportunities for vocal variety. And I look forward to hearing about the rest of these communication tools. Madam Evaluator, General Evaluator.
Thank you, Maurice. At this time, we will hear from our timer, Sean.
Lawrence's speech was 6 minutes and 53 seconds on books. Susan's speech on questions was 8 minutes 27 seconds. Maurice talked about bruxism, 2 minutes and 26 seconds.
Wow.
Cody,
That's a long time not to be able to define something.
Cody talked about Gilead, 1 minute. Cheyenne talked about Constellate, 35 seconds. Lawrence talked about Bibble, 1 minute 22. Don talked about, I can't pronounce that word, something phobia, 58 seconds. And then Cody's evaluation of Lawrence, 3 minutes 8 seconds. Maurice's evaluation of Susan's speech, 1 minute 59 seconds. That's the timer's report.
Thank you, Sean. Now we'll hear from Donovan, our all counter.
Okay. Maurice had 21. Diego had 17. Bill got 2. Lawrence had 22. Susan had 29. Sean had 2. She got 1. Cody got, I count real quick. Cody got 43, and Don had 6.
Okay, thank you, Don. And Olivia, could you tell us about the word of the day and any grammar usage?
Okay, the word of the day was rapscallion. It's spelled RAPSCALLION. And in the grammarian, I listened to Lawrence's speech. He used the word of the day twice during his speech and 3 times during his table topic. I was trying not to be the evaluator, but I will just say what I said, and it does relate to the language itself. I think your speech was casual. The use of the words were very interesting. It was natural and easy on the ears. Very captivating. And the poem, I was in awe. Chill bumps. So I guess the overall use of the English language was very well. If I had to say that I heard an error, it was, you said anyways. I am a person that likes, and I think it should have been maybe anyway without the S on the end. And then all literature that you get has value, and I was thinking maybe all literature that you obtain or receive or get your hands on has value. So that's the only thing I could think. The speech was beautiful.
Okay,
Oh, she's got more.
Oh,
That was
sorry.
just one.
Yeah, that was
My
my
bad.
speech.
Okay.
And so for Ms. Susan, your speech, to best describe the use of the language, I think it was bright, colorful, informative, and educational. I think if I was to say anything about the English language, it would be that you stumbled when you went to say he, as if you stopped and said the author, as if you recognized that, oh, we may not know who the he is that you were speaking about in your speech. But other than that, as far as any grammatical errors, I didn't catch any. I think it was beautiful. That's it. Oh. I'm done. Back to you.
thank you,
Mrs.
Olivia. Evaluator.
General evaluator. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so that concludes this evaluation portion of the meeting, and I will now relinquish the lectern back to our Toastmaster, Cody.
Heather. Well, Susan already gave us an educational overview. So I don't have anything that I would like to say. Does anyone want to do a quick educational overview? If you had something to say or get across? No? Okay. Moving on. So we're going to go to the portion of the meeting where we try to fill the roles for next week.
Yes.
Do we have any volunteers for speeches?
I nominate Cheyenne to be Toastmaster next week.
Table topics.
You want to do table topics? Okay.
Okay. You get in there.
I'll do
Okay, so
Toastmasters.
who wants to be Toastmaster?
I'll do that.
Cheyenne.
Cheyenne. Okay, Cheyenne to be
I'd
Toastmaster.
like to do educational overview.
And, okay.
But you lost.
Table topics.
Like, it's in
Heather's
the
gonna be, educational overview. Okay. Anybody else? Does anybody have a speech? Please, folks, if you have the opportunity, please, 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 try to look at your manuals, your path, find something that you can do a speech on. If possible, try to start doing multiple speeches as a mini educational overview. If you start thinking on a regular basis, the law of attraction, if you start thinking about things to give speeches on, then things about speeches will start jumping out at you everywhere you look. And if you take a little notebook and stick it in your pocket or on your iPad or something else, and you just quickly write down, oh, you know, I heard a good quote. And you try to write down what you remember of that quote or something. And then you can go back and you can look at that, and with a little bit of research, a little bit of blood, sweat, and tears, you'll be able to come up with a good speech and find a place for that speech later on down the road. And that's how I'm able to have pocket speeches, because I'm seeing speech topics everywhere I go. Some of which are probably not very good, and that's why they never show up. But anyways, the possibility is always there.
Did we assign a timer role?
Not yet.
No.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to be a timer?
Don can be it.
Don.
Anybody else? Okay,
I'll do a speech.
you'll do a speech.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't put it in until you
Yeah, I'll go.
log it, so log it.
It'll be my research speech, but I'll go log it.
Okay,
I need to put some pressure on myself.
on which speech?
It'll be the research speech from Pathways. Strategic. I don't even know what Pathways.
Okay,
Put me down as his evaluator.
all right. We'll put you down as an evaluator. You got it. GE? Do you want to be general or just,
Oh, I'll be Cody's speech evaluator.
okay,
Throw him down as first.
Yeah.
all right, first.
Which project, which method? Okay.
Cody, just send me an email of the electronic e-sheet whenever you get a chance.
Okay.
No rush.
I'll be the general evaluator.
Okay,
Oh, yeah, okay.
all right, sounds good.
It's pretty good. It's pretty book.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Don, I haven't forgotten that you still haven't done Toastmaster.
Yeah, that's,
Good.
I'll find out.
I don't think so. No, not yet, so I think that's the only thing we have open. Well, another speaker and off-counter, so if you want to do that, you feel the urge to do it, you can always get on Easy Speak and sign up for it later.
Yep,
Okay, no awards tonight, and I will work on getting our coffee basket. Diego's help, so.
Okay, so I trust that there's no one here who would like to do a speech contest next week. Okay, so I'll just ask Top Cats if they have anyone.
Who's the guy from downtown?
I forgot his name.
Okay,
And the VPE didn't send me any paperwork, so I don't know how that's going to go.
hopefully you will represent our district well. All right, thank you everyone.
All right.
Great meeting.